98 million. That's the number of cups of coffee that Brits drink every single day across the country. Despite the stereotype that Brits only drink tea. And America? Well, it runs on coffee.
Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin'.
According to Dunkin' Donuts, who I'm not sure are a great source of information, but figures later in this video will confirm that America also loved this brewed drink. But our first difference is the types of coffee that each country enjoys. An American cup of coffee, not to be confused with an Americano, that's something different which we'll get into in a minute, but a standard American cup of coffee, the kind you see served in all of the American movies at the diner, that's drip coffee or filter coffee. It's made by dripping water through a filter of medium roast ground coffee in quite a large pot. It can make around 4 to 12 servings per go.
And you don't want to know what happens to me when I don't have my coffee.
The classic sounds of the pot brewing has made its way into Hollywood and plenty of famous American commercials, including a popular brand called Folgers, who call it the best part of waking up.
The best part of waking up. Folgers in your cup.
Now, if we fly across the Atlantic to the UK, the type of coffee most popularly enjoyed there is espresso-based, made with an espresso machine, typically only in a single or double serving. The most popular coffee drinks ordered by Brits are lattes, Americanos, cappuccinos, and espresso. And it's important to note that an Americano is not the same thing as American coffee. An Americano is a shot of espresso with hot water, which is different from the filter coffee typically enjoyed as a standard cup of American coffee. This can confuse Americans who are traveling to the UK and vice versa. Now we'll move on to our next difference in a second, but it's important to note that Brits do drink filter coffee and Americans do drink espresso-based drinks. That's what the whole Starbucks revolution in the US was about, bringing espresso-based drinks to the American coffee market. But if you ask a person in each country what they generally think of as coffee, you're likely to run into two different answers. Now, who drinks more coffee? That's definitely the Americans, with 73% of Americans reporting they drink coffee regularly. Compare this to around 60% of Brits, so not wildly far off, or maybe not as much as you might think, given that the UK doesn't have as much of a reputation for its love of coffee, but the Americans still decidedly win when it comes to quantity of coffee enjoyed. Now, if we zoom back in history, the British love of coffee stems more from the European or Italian roots of coffee culture as more of a social thing to do. You might get together and have a coffee, someone comes over to your house for cake and coffee. Coffee in the UK was actually first used as a medicinal cure, or at least something that was seen as refreshing and giving you health benefits. It then became popular in the 1600s in what were known as coffee houses, which were typically places that men met to socialize and talk about business. It was seen as sort of a high society thing to do. Funnily enough, coffee consumption declined in the UK just as it was soaring in the US. Because in the US at the time, they were mainly tea drinkers. The US was colonized by the Brits after all. But then there was this whole kerfuffle, we'll call it, where the Americans threw the tea in the harbor, and while I'm sure there was plenty of tea actually left in the country, tea became symbolic in the USA as something associated with the Brits, which is not something they wanted to do at the time. Not only that, but it's about economics. Coffee was cheaper in the colonies than tea, and so Americans' love of coffee was born. Now, fun fact, the more modern love of coffee in America actually dates back to World War II. Coffee breaks were introduced in the factories to keep workers caffeinated and motivated, and so coffee became associated with productivity and with something positive, which it still is today. And as I mentioned, in recent decades, coffee is regularly consumed in large quantities in both countries. Starbucks has a stronghold in both countries for chain coffee, and in the UK, we have Costa Coffee and Caffè Nero. In the US, Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts reign supreme. And did you know there are 4 types of coffee beans that you can use? The most popular in the UK and the US is a coffee bean known as Arabica. Arabica coffee grows at altitudes of between 600 and 2,000 meters above sea level. It's cultivated mainly in Brazil and Central America, as well as Indonesia and parts of India, so essentially in regions lying between the two tropics. This is what Starbucks and most chain coffee places use. However, the second most commonly used coffee bean is known as Robusta, and Robusta is seen a little bit more in UK coffee blends than it is in the US, so again, there's a slight difference in terms of the actual coffee beans used. America tends to prefer a slightly more acidic coffee with darker darker and more bitter roasts being popular. Often, the ground coffee used in American coffee has been sitting for days, weeks, or months before being brewed, so it's lost a lot of its more delicate flavors. On the other hand, the espresso-style coffee typically enjoyed in the UK more often is lighter and freshly ground, which gives it a less bitter flavor and more nuance. And because of the concentrated nature of an espresso, coffee is seen as stronger in the UK in terms of flavor, not in terms of acidity. But you'll often see Brits and other Europeans complaining that an American cup of coffee tastes weak or watery. And then you've got to compare what's put into the drink. In the US, a lot of people enjoy their coffee black, i.e. with nothing at all in it, but if they're going to have something in it, they're going to add milk, sweeteners, or what's known as creamer. Creamer is basically a milk protein added to some water and oil. It's not actually cream, but it's a shelf-stable version imitating cream. Or they might add what's known as half and half, which is a blend of half milk and half cream. In the UK, people do often add milk to their coffee. Creamer or half and half is seen as a more American thing. Now, the iced coffee market is also larger in the US, which makes sense given more states are warmer than the UK, but drinking iced coffee, which is not unheard of in the UK, is much less popular there. A colder and damper climate requires hot drinks typically, not cold ones. And finally, let's talk decaf. Decaffeinated coffee actually isn't fully decaffeinated. There's anywhere from around 3 to 10% of caffeine in a cup of decaf coffee because the decaffeination process simply can't remove all of the caffeine and still have it taste like coffee. The stats show that decaf is more enjoyed in the UK, with about 20% of Brits saying that they have decaf, whereas only around 10 to 15% of Americans say the same. But did you know that most American decaf is made with what is known as the European method? That's right. This method, commonly used in Europe, involves soaking coffee beans in hot water. This extracts the caffeine because caffeine dissolves in water. Then it's combined with a chemical solvent which binds with the caffeine. Now that the solvent and the caffeine are together, you can separate that away from the beans. Most American decaf actually comes from Europe, with Germany and Italy being top exporters. There are other ways to make decaf coffee that do not involve chemicals, but this method has been deemed safe in Europe and by the FDA in the USA. And I do have to mention, for any coffee lovers out there who are screaming at their screens that Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts are not good coffee, the artisan coffee and independent coffee shop scene is definitely on the rise in both countries. It's not all chain coffee. There are plenty of unique blends and brands and shops that focus on quality over mass-produced coffee. The cup of coffee you'll get from a family-owned solo cafe in Seattle is far different than the coffee you'd be served in a Waffle House, which is an American diner. Similarly, the drink you get at Costa Coffee is a far cry from what you would get at an artisan coffee shop in somewhere like Brighton or London. So there you have it. Whether you use it as a social reason to meet up with friends or just something to drink before you get to work to keep your eyes open, you'll find plenty of fellow coffee lovers on either side of the pond. So it's your turn to weigh in. What kind of coffee do you enjoy? Where are you from? Do you drink it at all? What are your favorite brands? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. 98 million. That's... okay. If this fridge doesn't shut up. Come on. Come on, fridge. Why is my fridge so loud? Okay. If I'm in a good position, I'm not moving. We'll just wait. We'll just wait here.